vamos a dar inicio a la conferencia magistral titulada Construyendo, una gran empresa, Startup, impartida por Bob Dorf. Bob Dorf ha sido un consejero, delegado y fundador de Peppers & Roger Group, la práctica de consultoría de Customer Relationship Management por excelencia. Dorf es considerado un estratega líder en el campo de la gestión de relaciones con los clientes. Su trabajo ha ayudado a concebir y poner en práctica una de las estrategias de marketing de 7 empresas. Él ha iniciado 7 empresas, ha dado comienzo a 7 de las empresas más importantes en el mundo. Y bueno, actualmente es el coautor de One Filed Book con Don Peppers y Martha Rogers. En marzo de 2012, Dorf y su coautor Steve Blank publican Las instituciones de inicio, la guía paso a paso para construcción de una gran empresa, un manual paso a paso para crear un startup. Este libro lo podemos tener pronto en Amazon, en la computadora. Cuando nos metemos en Amazon para buscar un libro, pronto lo vamos a poder encontrar, pero aproximadamente en octubre de este año estará disponible ya traducido al español. Así es que muy pronto vamos a poder tener este libro que seguro va a ser de su interés. Demos la bienvenida a Bob Dorf. Adelante. Welcome to Mexico.
Well, that was by far the loveliest introduction and without question the most beautiful introducer I have ever had in many years of traveling the world talking about startups and marketing and so forth. And thank you very much. It was lovely to be here today. I can't even count how many trips. It's probably my 9th or 10th trip to your wonderful country and probably my 25th to Latin America. And I'm particularly pleased that after a year of fighting, negotiating, arguing, that at last the Startup Owner's Manual will be published in Spanish in the very beginning of October. But we're not here to talk about the book. We're here to talk about you and your startups. And first, who is this curly gringo standing up here in the front of the room? Startups are all about numbers, so I'll give you my numbers. At the age of 22, I frightened my mother, working class mother and father, telling them I was going to leave a wonderful job that in today's dollars paid about $200,000 US a year. Why was I going to leave that? Because I had to start a business. I had to be my own boss, had to have the challenge, had no idea about investors, venture capital, exits, any of that. I just wanted to be in charge and build something that had my name on it. So from the age of 22 to many, many years after that, I did 7 startups in all, none with any outside funding, and the 2 + 2 - 3, 2 home runs, 2 base hits, 2, sort of okay, and 3 straight into the baño. After that, I invested in 27 more startups, 7 IPOs, and 6 directly into the baño, and everything in between. And the reason the baño is so important when you think about what makes a great startup is because when you do it right, you spend all your time congratulating yourself and your founding team about how smart you are and how clever you are and so forth. And you learn so much more from the failures, from the scars on your back, and that's what helps you build a great startup. Now, one of the sad facts is that most of you will not succeed in your first startup. It takes sometimes 2 or 3 or 4. In my case, number 1 and number 7, just through coincidence, were the 2 big successes. And all this math is important for a very terrible, scary reason. The best estimate is that in a single year in the United States alone, there are 650,000 startups. And unfortunately, in any one year, only 12 of those 650,000 really turn into something that has dramatic impact, whether it's improving life in the third world, or making billions of dollars, or changing the way we search or interact or share pictures of our babies and dogs. And so if you are going to do the other part of my math lesson, to make your startup really important, you should begin that thought process on day one, because day one is the beginning of an investment you have to make in building a great startup, whether it succeeds or fails. You won't know how good you are for a few years. And the way I think about the investment of time you need to make in your startup is, at a minimum, it's 5 years of 80, 90, 100 hours a week. So before you know whether you're successful or not, you'll have spent 5 brutal, difficult, challenging, but hopefully satisfying, interesting, rewarding years of your life. And you'll get to the point where when you go home at night, either the man or woman in the bed either doesn't remember you or is in the bed with somebody else because you haven't showed up. And the dog will bark at you when you come in at 2 o'clock in the morning, "Who is this stranger in my house?" And if you are going to make this kind of commitment, this kind of dedication, don't you want to take out a little bit of an insurance policy? And this insurance policy is really the brilliance of what Steve Blank developed when he first sat down to work on devising the customer development process about 12 years ago in 2001. Before you invest those 20,000 hours, before you invest your uncle's money or your investor's money, or worse, your own money, don't you want to make sure you're working on something muy importante, something that can make a difference? Not necessarily economically. Hopefully, that's a byproduct of your success. But if you are founding a startup because you want to be the first Mexican Mark Zuckerberg, that is the wrong reason. Do it because you want to love what you do every day, because you want the challenge, you like the risk, you want to have exciting people around you working hard on exciting things. Because if you don't have that kind of passion deep down in your gut, nothing will get you through the dark days, and there'll be plenty of dark days in those 5 years of your startup. And so the beginning of the customer development process came to recognize just literally 10 years ago that startups no longer fail for technology problems. You can build just about anything today with all the tools and the software and the templates and the technology that's out there. The only 2 things you can't yet build are the 2 I want the worst: a time travel machine so I could be 12 on the outside as well as 12 years old on the inside, and the instant diet pill, you take it tonight and you're 20 pounds lighter in the morning. I'm still waiting for that, and I have a check for anyone who's working on that startup. But the biggest problem is that we don't think about customers until we've worked 4 or 5 or 10,000 hours. We assume we're smart founders, we're good entrepreneurs, we have a great idea, so we lock ourselves in the basement or the attic or in a lead-lined room, and we build, and then we buy some champagne and some balloons, and we have a launch party, and what happens? Only then, after all that hard work and all that money is spent, do we realize that nobody gives a crap about what we've just spent the last few years working on. So the whole brilliance of the customer development methodology is that on this first day, the day you start building your product or writing your first lines of code, on that very same first day, one of your partners starts getting out of the building, talking to customers, find out what they like, what they don't like, what they like about your product, what they don't like about it, what they'd like you to add to it or subtract from it, usually in the price department. And you continuously feed that learning right into the product so that when the product is done, it knows that customers want it. It knows where they want to buy it, how much they're willing to pay for it, why it's better than SAP or Oracle or whatever. And if you do those two things in parallel, you have a tremendous opportunity to reduce the horrible, horrible failure rate of startups. Because the thing that we don't talk about too much in conferences like these or in incubators is that somewhere between 96 and 98% of all startups that are built to scale, built to be big companies, 96 to 98% of those companies will fail. And they will fail in an ugly pile of blood and guts and bone. And your blood, your guts, your perspiration is in that pile. And so the more you can do to improve your chances for success in the earliest days of your startup, the better your chances. This methodology has truly taken the world by storm. Steve Blank and I feel like we are infecting people with this disease. I have the privilege, the honor of traveling all over the world, talking to bright, passionate young entrepreneurs like yourselves, getting them infected with this methodology, with this way of thinking about their business. It started really in Stanford and Berkeley, where Steve was teaching it. Then I brought it east to Columbia University and to Skolkovo in Moscow. It's now taught at over 100 universities all over the world, including right here all over Tec de Monterrey. The America's National Science Foundation adopted the methodology and trains 400 teams of scientists and engineers in a year in how to make their startups come to life and reduce the failure rate using the customer development method. And Steve and I get love letters every week from startups over the world who've either read our book or seen our workshops or whatever. Thank you. Usually these letters come to us, the love letters come to us just after somebody gets funding. And that's fine. We're thrilled to see them succeed on our learning, and we're just we've both had plenty of our own startup successes. We are very happy to transmit the 500 or 600 stupid mistakes that we've made to all of you so you don't have to make them again. I've also taught this methodology more than a few times now in a full-blown program called Lean Launchpad in Bogota and other parts of Colombia. And in the first group, 25 teams of startups, by the end of the 8th week, 8 of those 25 teams, instead of having a beautiful business plan I'll talk about in a minute, they had what we all want. They had revenue. One of them had a $50,000 purchase order for their enterprise software in week 8. A B2C startup had 315 cash-paying customers. This stuff works.
Estas cosas funcionan. Y es algo que deberían de ustedes estar pensando de una manera muy seria. Sí, yes, we're doing the translation for all those non-English speaking people that are in the room. Ah, que no quieren. Pues parece ser que la gente no quiere.
Keep talking? Okay. All right. The wonderful job I quit when I was 22 was in the radio business, where I started out as a rock and roll DJ, so I can talk really fast and you won't understand a word, and if you don't think you'll understand, the translators certainly won't understand. But anyway, So we'll slow down just a little bit. But the point of this is this is a different way to think about your startup. Instead of getting up every morning and build, sell, do half of that and spend the other half of the time talking to the only people whose opinions about your business matter, the people who are going to give you money. And the more you can learn from them and the more of that you can inject into your product, the better your chances for success when you launch all those balloons and champagne. Now, most startups fail because on day one, the founders say, gee, I'm smart, I have honors degrees from Tech de Monterey and other universities, and I know what the customer wants, and I know what needs to go in the box or in the software to make the customer happy. And then they set up a program like this, a very step-by-step process for building their product or building their software or building their service. But this is ridiculous, because on day one of a startup, you don't even know who your customers are. You don't have any customers. How could you possibly know what their problems are, and how could you possibly know how to solve them? And this is the fundamental difference between a startup and an established company. If I'm already doing business, I have customers, I have resellers, I have salespeople, I have competitors, I have lots and lots of facts. So when I want to turn out my next product or launch a totally new product, I have a whole bunch of data. And so I can execute on that knowledge, with reasonably high degree of success. Major corporations, established corporations, are great at making more money by introducing the new version of X or Y or Z. But a startup on its first day of life is a team of crazy, passionate people dropped into the middle of a jungle somewhere, and all you're told is, somewhere out there's a bag of gold with your name on it, and by the way, there's alligators and tigers and crocodiles and quicksand. Here's a compass and a bag of groceries. Good luck. You are going on that same kind of search. And it's not just for customers, and it's not just for the right product, because a product is not a business. A product is an item. It doesn't have a way to sell, it doesn't have customers, it's got lots of other elements I'll talk to you about in a minute. And for the last 75 or 100 years, we used to think that you started your startup by locking yourself in a room and writing a business plan. 50, 75 pages, all beautifully formatted, lots of spreadsheets at the back, and no matter what your business, the last spreadsheet, the far right-hand column, somehow magically, it always came out to revenue of $100 million and profits of $15, $17, $18 million. Why? Because that's what the investors wanted to see in order to write you a check. And so maybe you got lucky and you wrote a really good plan and the typefaces were great and they liked you and they wrote you a check. Then all you have to do is make the forecast you drew up. But the forecast is fairy tales. How can you, sitting here today, tell me how much revenue your startup is going to have in the second quarter of 2014, let alone next week? You have no idea. You haven't begun to sell. You don't know exactly what you're selling, who you're selling to, who your competitors are, what they charge. And so usually by about the third board of directors meeting, your investors are beating you over the head saying, well, how come your sales are off by 30%? You have 4 more people than you told us you were going to hire, and this is off, and this is off, and this is off. You gave us a plan. Yeah, we gave you a plan because we knew you had to see that to invest in it. But if you want to know the honest truth, we made it up so that it would look good enough for you to give us a check. And so it's no longer true. And this worked wonderfully. Let me tell you, in the mid-1990s, in the middle of the internet bubble in New York and Silicon Valley, you could write one of these beautiful business plans, and you could go out, and even if your startup was dogpoopinabag.com, you could raise a couple of $1 million because there was a fever in investing in startups that sadly we will never see again. And some of those startups made it, and most of them are in the baño where they deserve to be. $5 million worth of Super Bowl advertising before you know exactly what you're selling or how much you can make on every order. And the problem with these business plans is that you're not allowed to glue one to every copy of your product so that when the customer is walking through the supermarket or the Office Depot, they can look at the plan and says, oh, I'm supposed to buy 3 of these and come back in a month and buy 2 more, and then I'm supposed to give them for Christmas presents, and so forth. Because the business plan is pretty much all fairy tales. And if you look at just a few, I'm not going to spend any time on this, the most colossal failure probably of all time, Webvan raised $2.6 billion on a business plan and a prototype. And the business plan said 70%, this Webvan delivered groceries, automated warehouse, delivered to your home the next morning. The business plan said that 70% of the customers would order every week. And while they were raising and spending $2.6 billion, the customer reorder rate was more like 17% than 70%, and the orders got smaller, not bigger. So all the numbers collapsed, and Webvan was the first sort of miraculous, monstrous bankruptcy of a public company during the sort of internet bubble of the late 90s. So why spend those 2 months writing these fairy tales? Instead, spend those 2 months on a search for a business that is repeatable, where you can make the same sales call and get pretty much the same result every time. That's scalable. If you have 100 customers, you know where the next 100 are, and the next 100, and the next 100 after that, and that not necessarily today the business can be profitable once it gets to a certain volume. And so instead of spending that 2 months writing a business plan, spend a day or 2 drafting a business model. The business model is a concept developed about 5 years ago by Dr. Alexander Osterwalder, a Swiss PhD, who said that you can summarize all of the elements of any business on a single sheet of paper in 9 boxes. And so the center box, value proposition number 1, yes, that's the product. But it's the product, who are the competitors, what are the prices, what are the features, and so forth. And it's one of, as you can see, 9 elements that include partners and cost structure and revenue and so much more. And I'm going to walk you through just a few of these. The value proposition, right? It's not just what's my product, it's why is somebody going to buy this product from me? And why are they going to buy this from me instead of that from Intuit, or this other thing from Oracle, or this third thing from SAP? And what am I going to charge them, and so forth. Customer segments, box number 2, equally critical. Exactly who is my most perfect customer? Who is the customer that is going to be most excited to see, discover, and buy this product? Because if you don't get those 2 boxes right, you don't have a business, right? If you don't know exactly who your customer is and exactly what it is they want to buy from you, you have no foundation for your business. Mark Andreessen, the famous venture capitalist, calls this product market fit, right? The value proposition is the product. This is the offer I am making to you, my customer, to get you to part with your money. The customer segment is the market. It is not, in fact, when we did this in Latin America, we were introducing inventory management software for bodegas. And it's very clear, you've all been to plenty of bodegas, they're the same here as they are in Colombia, and probably half of them, right, the cash register is the owner's pocket, there's a mixed, not particularly big inventory, and basically the owner is trying to squeak out a living. Does that person want inventory management and cash flow management software? Probably not. At the other end of the scale, you have really beautiful bodegas that are well merchandised, they're well presented, and our rule was if it had to have 2 checkout lines, and the owner had to not be at either of those checkout lines because he or she was too busy running their business, trying to grow their business. And those were the people who we thought were prospects for our value proposition of simple, inexpensive software to manage your inventory and your cash flow. Now think about when you're out making sales calls on bodegas. Think of how many you can walk by if you understand that vision of your customer. You can be 3 times as efficient as somebody who hasn't defined their customer segment well, because you get to walk by 2 out of 3 bodegas and not even waste your time going in and introducing yourself. Will you miss a sale once in a while? Maybe. But your opportunity is with the much more narrowly defined customer segment. And I have seen time and time again that people don't prove to themselves that they have really found this product market fit, and they just keep on marching forward. And it takes courage to say, we're going to slow this train down because we're not confident that we really have a great business yet. And we don't have product market fit. So let's take some time, sometimes a week, sometimes it's a lot more than a week, to make sure that we really have a compelling value proposition and we know which customers are going to be excited about buying it from us. If you get those 2 boxes right, the company killer of all time is the next box, the customer relationships box. How am I going to get my customers? If I get them, how am I going to keep them? And if I can keep them, how am I going to grow them? Right? You grow them 3 different ways. First, by selling them more of the same product. Second, by selling them other products or services. And third, and probably most important, if you see that viral loop on the bottom, you use your satisfied, happy customers to help you find other customers. And if you're launching a web business or a mobile business, viral marketing is almost certainly about all you can afford until you are showing enough momentum, enough traction to get investors interested in giving you money for paid advertising. So getting this viral marketing right as smartly and as quickly as you can is critical to your business, because otherwise the cost of getting customers is so huge and so unpredictable that it is highly likely to be the single greatest factor in putting your company out of business. Once you've figured out those 3, who's my customer, what am I selling her, and how am I going to get her attention, then you can begin to think about your revenue model. How will this company make money, not necessarily today, but somewhat down the road? And once you understand that, yes, this can be profitable someday, it's time to really get to work. Because at this point, all you really have on your business model canvas is a bunch of guesses. These are your guesses on this canvas about what makes this a business. Now you have to turn those guesses into facts, and this is where the business model canvas becomes your scorecard, and you go out and start to, these slides are in a hurry, maybe they're trying to tell me something, and you go out and you start to prove every box in that canvas with the only people who matter, your customers. So I'm not going to talk about all of the steps in customer discovery, because what we found in the customer development process is that the first two steps are by far the most powerful for startups, and the others come much later. Once you have predictable, steady revenue coming in, once you really have an operating business, and there are lots of books better than ours about teaching you how to execute an established business that's got traction and so forth. And so what you do is you get out of the building and start talking to customers about your initial ideas. Now you go out of the building in two very different steps. The first time you go out, you don't talk about your product at all. And this is very hard typically for entrepreneurs to do, because entrepreneurs love to come home late at night, and if the dog is listening or the significant other is listening, wow, I made 15 sales calls today. 2 people were really interested. 1 slammed the door in my face. Boy, this is going to be great. We like to do stuff. It's in our DNA as entrepreneurs. But I am begging you to spend some time listening and exploring and searching and not doing in the entrepreneurial sense. Because the very first thing you need to find out about is the famous Bob Dorf give a crap test. Does anybody you're selling to give a crap not about your product, but about the problem you're about to spend 5 years building a business to solve? Is this an important problem? Is it a problem that's going to cost them money, cost them their spouse, cost them their house or their job? Is it a problem they have once a year? That's probably not a great business. If they have it once a day or twice a day, or they lose sleep every night, now maybe you're on to something, because what you're defining here is the market. Is there a market opportunity for what I am going forward to do? Right? Most business-to-business products are sold because they solve problems. Many consumer products are solved because they fill needs. Sometimes they fill needs we don't even realize we have, like Facebook. Who knew we wanted to share 1 million pictures of us drinking beer with our friends, with our mothers and our school teachers and our future employers? We never really realized that until the opportunity presented itself. So what you're trying to find out is if anybody really cares. Step 1A, if you will, is after you've done some of that, you have almost always learned that you are not the most urgent need or critical problem on earth. Go back and do some homework and see if you can make your company better, make the focus better. The best way to do that is to make believe you are your own customer and spend at least a day, if not a few days, on Google or Bing or wherever you like to search, sitting in your favorite chair, trying to buy the product or service that you are going out to sell. Start by looking at who's selling things like yours in Mexico, or if you're local, in Mexico City or in Monterrey or wherever. And then expand your search to Latin America and to the US. But don't look at the first page of search results. Look at the first 10 pages of search results, because on page 9, more often than not, what you'll find is Microsoft closes a business that it started to do just what you're going to do, and they wrote off $75 million because of the failure. that resulted from nobody gives a crap. Don't you want to find that out before you invest the 5 years? Don't you want to see if you can do it another way that's more compelling, that's more exciting? And the time to do that is before you spend all the money, before you build the product, before you launch the business, because most of the time it's then too late. I don't know how many of you followed a company called Color.com. It was some new way to share photos and so on and so forth. It had a blue chip founding team, blue chip venture capitalists, $41 million before they had a product. They worked and they worked and they worked, and they spent $48 million even though they raised 41. And they launched the product and nobody cared. And that business died. There's a lovely, I guess it's colorful pile of blood and bones and so forth, because nobody did any homework before they went out to the real world. Now, there are some key things not to do when you do customer discovery. Rule number one, probably most important of all, is you are not selling. You are having conversations, loose, unstructured conversations with people you hope might be your customers someday. But if they have the impression that you're selling, they're not going to give you so much feedback, and they're only going to give you negative feedback because they don't want to have to take out their wallet. Number two, they're going to shut down. They're going to, we all try to get that salesman or saleswoman out of our office as quickly as you can. And what you want is a fluid conversation that talks about as many of the boxes in your business model canvas as you can. So, like, get customers. Well, if there was a product that did something like this, where would you find it? Would you read about it in a magazine? Would you read about it in a blog? Would you only trust it if the introduction came from a friend? Use these conversations to figure out your marketing plan. Where would you buy it, do you think? Would you want to buy it in a store? Would you buy it online? Would you only buy it if a salesperson showed up at your home or office? Again, get an understanding from your customers about the right way to build your business. This is why it's so critically important for you, the founders, to do this discovery yourselves. If you send out interns or marketers, they're not going to listen as carefully. They're not going to care as much. And most important, they are not empowered to say, wow, that's a really good idea. We're going to change our business, because that's the fourth time I've heard that from somebody who seems like a knowledgeable, serious potential customer. So we're going to change this part of our product or our pricing or our distribution or whatever. You, as the founder, are the only one with the authority to listen to those comments that way. You don't have to do it all, but for a while you've got to do more than half of it. And you've got to create a culture in your company that we want to suck every ounce of feedback we can out of our customers, because that's the key ingredient, the secret sauce we're going to use in building our company. And the other key warning, never do customer discovery with your friends and family. It gets to what I call the ugly baby syndrome. You could be the parents of the ugliest baby in the history of the modern world. And when you bring that baby to Christmas dinner, oh, what gorgeous ears. Oh, I've never seen such cute toes. Or, oh, what cheeks. And they don't talk about the fourth eye and the, whatever, right? Because they know that's what you want to hear. So when you go to a roommate or a friend or an uncle, say, hey, I'm working on this idea. Tell me what you think about it. You're going to get horribly biased feedback, biased by their love for you and their enthusiasm for what you're doing and for your success. So just don't do it. Instead, ask those friends and family to introduce you to someone who's close to them but not close to you. Hey, my cousin Felipe is thinking about starting a business in the accounts receivable software industry. He's a really smart engineer, and you're a controller at a mid-sized company. Would you do me a favor and spend a half hour with Felipe? I promise you, rule number 3, he's not selling. He wants your reaction to the problem. He wants your feedback to his approach. That's how you get to valuable, usable, honest feedback. I'm not saying that, that ugly baby with 4 eyes is it is dishonest feedback, but we give it lovingly. You need to get genuine feedback, because as your company starts to move and starts to scale up a little bit, you're not going to be able to talk to these customers one at a time anymore. And so you need to learn their attitudes, their beliefs, their behaviors, not just about the product, but about the marketing, about the costs, about the distribution, about the partners you should have to reach them, and so forth. The number one tool in your bag is what we've come to call the minimum viable product, right? The first time you go out of the building, you don't need this, because you're not talking about your product at all. You're only talking about what? About the problem you're solving, right? So you don't have to show me anything. You're just talking about my problem with accounts payable or receivable, or keeping my teeth clean, or finding love on the web, or whatever your industry is. But the second time you go out, you want to say, gee, you've told me that accounts receivable software is a big problem for you. We are working on a product that looks like this. It doesn't have to work. It doesn't have to work at all. It has to be enough of an illustration of what the product is, what its features and functions are, so that you can get the most genuine, most information-rich feedback from that customer on what they like and don't like, whether they think this really solves the problem, starts to scale up a little bit, and whether they, not going to be able to talk to these customers one at a time anymore, or whatever. And so you need to, if you're building an app or a website, nothing has to work. Just create 5 or 6 or 7 screens. Here's the home page on howtofallinlove.mx. And you can do one of 3 things. You can look for a guy, you can look for a girl, you can look for one of each. And if you click on girl, here's what happens next. Swipe that screen over. No, you didn't touch the button, because the button isn't wired. There's no back-end technology. And you walk a customer through 5 or 6 or 7 screens, and you give them a sense of what your vision for the product is, and the quality of the feedback is dramatically, dramatically better. I had a situation in Colombia where a group of very young engineers from Barranquilla, a small city, had developed an idea for an iPhone app. In Barranquilla, the buses are about as reliable as I suspect they are in Mexico City. They're always late. They never seem to go, at least in Barranquilla, where Route 103 is supposed to go. Suddenly it winds up across town. The bus company changes the routes but doesn't tell the passengers, because why would they need to know that? And you can never find a charging station for your fare card when you need one. And so their idea was to build a free downloadable, iPhone and Android app that would have all of this information, including, your bus is 7 minutes late, have another cup of coffee before you run. And I said, guys, that's a very interesting, and it would be supported by advertising that says, when you step off the bus at this street, you can get a special deal at the Juan Valdez shop or a discount on clothing over here or whatever, and that was the economic model for the business. The only problem was they needed the bus company as a partner because the bus company controlled the data. And they said, guys, if you three bright young engineers walk in there and just talk, the bus company's just, all you have is an idea. It's going to be hard for them to understand it. It's going to be hard for them to have any respect for you. And if you don't have them as a partner, you don't have a business. And so they developed 7 or 8 screens in PowerPoint. You know, the first one said, welcome to the bus company. What would you like to do today? Click on one of these 5 things. Swipe. You're looking for the best way to get to Banamex. Click here, and it shows you a route. And it just illustrated what the product would do when it was built. They walked out of the bus company with a handshake from 3 senior executives that said, we'll draw up a contract and get started with you next week. They have a lovely business. They're expanding to other cities, and they're one of my many, sort of favorite love letters. This is such an easy step, but most entrepreneurs, particularly engineers, don't want to show off their baby till it's graduated from college and holding the diploma. Why would you wait until every dot on your screen is refined and the right color and all the bugs are out and so forth before you showed it to customers? You can learn so much if you can show them something that illustrates the product in a week or 2 or 3. If you take my full semester course at Columbia Business School and you don't have a minimum viable product, by the end of the 3rd week, you're summoned to my office for a beating, and usually they have it by the 4th week. It is so instrumental into getting quality feedback. What do you want to do with that feedback? Most of the time, it's going to lead you to the other critical tool, the pivot. The pivot has become sort of the language of startups. And basically what it means is we have now shown our MVP to enough people to recognize that it's not very good, or nobody's going to pay what we think for it, or nobody's real excited about it at all. We're never going to get anybody telling their friends about it. And so a pivot says, okay, let's come back to the office and think about which one of the 9 boxes of our business model do we want to throw a hand grenade in and completely, dramatically change. Simple example, a small startup within General Electric that we worked on. Small, except that it had $100 million in investment capital. Other than that, it was a startup no further advanced, I assure you, than any of yours. And we were calling on cellular telephone companies trying to sell them $60,000 backup batteries. And they kept saying, oh, $60,000, that's a capital expense. It takes us 2 or 3 years before we can get something like that approved. And so the CEO said, I don't have 3 years, because the CEO of General Electric said, yeah, I'm giving you $100 million, but I want $1 billion in revenue by 2016 or you are fired. So I can't wait 3 years to see if these people like my product. So we went down to the leasing department and said, can't we sell these batteries by the month instead of $60,000 cash up front? We changed an easy box on the canvas. We changed the revenue model. Lots of people do this by taking a paid iPhone app or Android app and making it freemium. Freemium is a nightmare. First of all, 92% of the apps downloaded on the App Store are free. real problem, right? That means you're going to get downloaded, but the opportunity to convert to cash is tiny. And what you're doing is you're delaying your own determination of whether you have a business or not, because you don't know what percent of those people will ever give you any money. The worst example of this of all is Dropbox. How many of you have a Dropbox account in the room? Okay, keep your hands up a second. How many of you send any money at all to Dropbox? Nope. Do I see? Okay, not a hand. I'll raise mine. I send them $39.95 a year to get unlimited storage because we are moving tons of movies and files around. Dropbox is a darling of the investor community. I still can't quite figure out why. I mean, the why is it has hundreds of millions of users. But for every one of you, for every 100 Dropbox users, 2.5 users give them money, usually $39.95. So that means that $100 in revenue is supporting Dropbox service for 1,000 customers, right? So think about how hard, for 100 customers, right? $100 spread across 100 customers, 2.5%. They have to pivot their revenue model to giving us less storage or selling us more stuff or doing something if they're ever going to make enough money to make their many, many millions of dollars of investors happy. Now, many of you, I'm sure, work or have worked at big companies. When you have a pivot, you know, because somebody got fired, right? Sales wasn't working, they fired the head of sales. Marketing wasn't bringing in leads, they hired the head of marketing. The numbers weren't right, they fired the CFO. Something dramatic happens and everybody freezes. Everybody says, okay, what's going to happen now? Am I going to keep my job? What's the company going to do? Are they going to cut back or whatever? Because you've had a sort of unnatural act. You've had a pivot. And pivots are scary in ongoing companies. In your startup, you should almost welcome them. You should accept them gracefully. And you should learn from, well, we've made 25 sales calls and nobody was really excited and wanted to get the product right away. We probably have some more work to do. Let's go back and work on the product and do some more discovery, some more learning, and figure out how to make it better. Or maybe we're just explaining it badly. Let's try a different explanation and see if that gets people more excited. And so you have to do these pivots quickly. You don't freak out about them. There's nothing traumatic about them. It is part of what makes a startup great in today's modern world where there's very little money until you can demonstrate real traction with your business. It's brutally hard. It's hard in New York and Silicon Valley. It's 10 times harder here and throughout Latin America to find early stage angel seed money for a startup. And you make it 10 times harder again if you have nothing to talk about other than your resume and your great idea and your vision and how big the market is. Show me traction, I'll show you dinero. Work on getting the traction as quickly as you can, as inexpensively as you can, by changing your business wherever you need to change it in order to find that excitement, that enthusiasm. Hundreds and hundreds of companies have gone on to greatness by making a dramatic pivot in their business. The shortest story on this list is probably Groupon. Groupon was founded as a company called ThePoint.com, and it was aggregating people in Chicago, Illinois, to go out and clean up parks or paint poor people's houses or do good work in the community. We need 25 people to clean up this park on Saturday, and so will buy the pizza if you show up. And that their business model was they would sell advertising to all those wonderful people. Well, nobody showed up. It really didn't work, and they weren't getting any advertiser interest because it wasn't a particularly special audience. And they were just about out of money, and they were sitting in the pizza joint at the ground floor of their office building wondering, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? Should we just shut it down and give what little money we have back to the investors? One of the founders walked over to the owner of the pizza joint and said, gee, not a lot of people in here for 1 o'clock on a weekday afternoon. If we could get 50 people to show up here next Thursday, would you give them a really good discount? Like buy one pizza, get one free? Because we have large mailing lists of people in Chicago by neighborhood. We'll just try it with this neighborhood. And the pizza guy said, sure. There was a line around the block next Thursday. The point was closed, and it pivoted to Groupon. Groupon is having its struggles because they stopped listening to their customers and monitoring their behavior. But the struggles didn't keep them from going public at a market cap of $12 billion US. So you have to do these pivots quickly. You have to be courageous. You have to be brave enough to sit around a table, first with your management team and then with your investors, say, you know, guys, this really isn't working. This wasn't the muy importante startup we were getting together to build. We've got to do something different. Let's talk about what it can be honest with each other, that we have we have a dead horse in the race, and let's find out if there's a way we can pivot some or several aspects of our business to do something different. And when it doesn't work, which is most of the time, right? If you're trying to build, right? Remember, the goal for most of you is a business that's repeatable, right? I can always find another 100 customers for this. It's scalable. It can go to other cities, other countries, other continents, and it's profitable. Well, it's a big, tall order. So you're not going to ever get it right the first or second time. And when it doesn't work, or when you can't look yourself in the mirror and say, wow, people are really excited about what I'm offering. They're just ready to grab it out of my hands. If you can't say that or something close to it to yourself, get back out of the building and do it again. Because there's no better way to learn how to make your business great than to ask the people who are going to give you money. I love it when my students come up to me at the university, Professor, what do you think of my idea? My answer is universally, well, what I think doesn't really matter at all. I mean, what matters is what your customers think. Now, I will tell you, I think it's stupid for the following reasons. You may want to think about these reasons before you go embarrass yourself. But this is a, sort of rinse and repeat. You've got to keep cranking on it until you and your team have evidence, not anecdotes, that this could really work. How you know when it really works, this is really not meant to be an eye exam, but we put little circles in each of the boxes of the business model canvas. And so green is, yeah, I'm sure this is right. I'm sure my way to get customers is just right. And the number that you can't read in the middle of that circle is, and I base that opinion based on 27 customer interviews. So you can't put a green circle up there based on 3 or 4 or 5 interviews. And if you're not sure yet, it's yellow. And if you're sure you're wrong, it's red, and it's time for a discussion of the pivot. Now, the beauty of everything I've talked about is I haven't spent any serious money. I have worked you to death. I have worn out several pairs of shoes of yours, and you have perspired immensely, and your brain hurts. But the chances of you building a successful company are so much greater if you take a month or 2 or 3 at the very beginning and start to apply some of this thinking and, most important, some of these feedback tools. And if you're in business 6 months and you don't feel like your company is on fire, instead of coming in tomorrow and doing the same thing again and maybe doing it slightly differently, take a week. Stop what everybody in the company is doing. Everybody go out. First, sit down, draw your business model canvas. What is it you think your business looks like? And then split the team up and go out in different directions and talk to customers and get their feedback. Could this be different? Could it be better? Any other ideas you have about what should be in the product or not in the product? And as you learn from this, come back and process the information and see if you have a few more green lights sort of as you go. Everything I've talked about, unfortunately, is step 1 of the customer development process, customer discovery. Do I have customers? Do they give a crap about what I'm doing? And do I have some faith belief that I can make money? Once you get there, it's time to actually test this, and this is where you need a little bit of money. Because if you've made, say, 25 sales calls, and you've gotten 3 people to say, yeah, I'll buy it, that's 12%, right? That's not terrible, and as you get better at this, that 12% might go to 15 or 18. It's certainly never going to be 100% or 60% of the people you talk to eager to buy your product. But if you can see a pattern that says, I can consistently get to 12%, then maybe it's time to spend a little bit of money, and instead of calling on 25 or running $500 worth of advertising, call on 100 or run $2,500 worth of advertising, and make sure that those same hypotheses hold up as you get your company a little bit bigger. You still haven't launched your company, you haven't launched your product, you're still testing whether your guesses, whether your hypotheses make sense, and whether you can turn them into a business. And the farther you go along that line, the more likely you are to be able to attract investment, even in a challenging investment climate like Latin America. Imagine if you get most of the way through validation and you're starting to see a pattern. I know that if I call on golfers who play 3 times a week or more and who drive fancy cars and are club members, that 2 out of 10 of them are going to buy my super deluxe, very expensive new golf club. You quickly get to the point where you can say to an investor, we have created this machine where we make 10 sales calls on golfers at a cost of $20 a sales call, so we spend $200, and for every 10 we make, we sell 2 $300 golf clubs for $600. It doesn't work exactly that way every time, but it's close enough. And what you have done for that investor is you have taken not all, but a lot of the risk out of your startup. And instead of pitching, oh, we have a great new idea for a super duper golf club that golfers are going to love, trust us, you have some proof that your idea resonates with the only people that matter, with customers. And you have some idea of how the revenue works, of how the sales process works, of what the product is, what the marketing is. You have moved your company miles forward on perspiration, shoe leather, exhaustion, and you have dramatically improved your chances for success. And so if there are 5 words more than any that I want to leave you with, they are the mantra of customer development. There are no facts in your building, no facts in your office. Spend your time out of the building where your customers live and where the facts that I hope will drive you to success live as well. Thank you. And now we...
Bob, a great conference. In October, all are going to buy your book. I'm sure. And now tenemos un reconocimiento por esta gran conferencia y pedimos la presencia del licenciado Carlos Gramillo, asesor del presidente del INADEM, si nos hace favor de subir al estrado. Y bueno, también tenemos un regalo que nos da la Secretaría de Economía y la Semana del Emprendedor, que es una computadora. Y ahorita les voy a decir cuál es la pregunta. Licenciado, bienvenido.
Did it take all those words to say what a smart, charming, handsome man?
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Wonderful presentation. Okay.
Muchas gracias, licenciado. Bueno, y ahora, para hacer entrega de la computadora, Bob ha formulado esta pregunta. Cuando vas a buscar a tu cliente, ¿qué es lo primero que haces? Levante la mano. Tenemos una señorita que va a hacer la traducción. Y Bob, you have to choose the person.
You choose. I'll judge. Okay.
Me. A ver, tú de rayas. De la camisa de rayas.
Camisa de rayas.
Acá tenemos el micrófono.
Hola, hola.
El examen.
Okay, the first thing you have to do is actually validate the idea with the customer. Tell him what is your product and what are the things that the customer would want in their product.
I'm sorry, we need another guess. I'm sorry.
The lady over there.
Okay.
La señorita que grita del suéter café. Adelante.
La que se hizo escuchar.
Bueno, ya. Thank you. Well, you don't have to ask the client to buy your product. Mainly, the main thing you have said is that you have to talk with your customers, but not as a seller. Actually, you have to talk to them as a normal people and then try to convince them to buy your product, but not, you have not to talk to them as a seller. You have to talk to them as a normal people, and then you have to investigate. You have to get out of the building.
Okay, but the question, what do you talk to them about the first time you go out?
What they want. You don't talk about your product. You talk about what are their necessities.
That's a maybe. Let's take one more and see. That's close. Not okay.
Okay, Bob. One more?
One more.
Perfect. You choose now.
I go for the guy here, right here. Okay? This is so important that you get this right. It is such an important mistake that so many startups make, that our first two answers are close, but go ahead, good luck.
All right, first of all, thank you for all the knowledge that you have shared with us. And what you have to do is exactly talk to them, a regular kind of talk, but listen what are their main problems and how you can solve them. If they have big problems, if they have run out of